The sun had barely cleared the rooftops of Silver Maple Estates when Keanu Reeves wheeled out the small wooden cart he had built with his own hands. It wasn't fancy, just a simple stand with a canopy, 3 shelves, and a handwritten sign that read, "Free breakfast for kids. Take what you need, Red Heart." For weeks, he had been waking up before dawn, preparing fresh fruit cups, granola bowls, milk cartons, and warm pancakes. He never filmed it, never announced it. This wasn't for the internet. It was for the kids in the neighborhood whose parents rushed out to work before sunrise. The kids who sometimes went to school tired, hungry, and embarrassed to admit it. Keanu had noticed it quietly during his early morning walks. A little girl waiting alone at the bus stop with her arms wrapped around her stomach. 2 brothers sharing 1 slice of bread. A boy pretending he wasn't hungry today, even though his eyes lingered on every snack in his friend's hands. Something inside him broke. So, he started the stand. The first day, only 1 kid approached it. A shy boy named Liam, no more than 10 years old, wearing a backpack too big for his small body. Keanu had smiled gently, letting the kid choose anything he wanted. Liam took a banana and a single pancake, whispering a tiny "thank you" before rushing away. The next day, 5 kids showed up. Then 7. Then a dozen. And now, this morning, Keanu watched as a line of nearly 20 children formed. Some came on foot, some on old bicycles, some with siblings half asleep on their shoulders. The sight filled his heart with something warm and indescribable. The kids loved him. They called him Mr. K because Keanu Reeves was too cool a name to say casually. "Mr. K, do you have more strawberry cups today?" "Mr. K, my little brother wants a pancake." "Mr. K, the syrup is the best." Keanu laughed softly as he handed out plates. He had never felt more grounded in a community. The parents, those who weren't working at that hour, thanked him endlessly. Some dropped off extra fruit or milk cartons to help. A few even offered to volunteer. It had become something beautiful, which, of course, meant the HOA would hate it. Keanu first sensed trouble when he saw Janice Pemberton, HOA president, self-appointed dictator of all things petty, walking toward him with her arms folded tight enough to snap bone. Her lips were pursed so hard they looked like they were trying to escape her face. Behind her, 2 other board members followed, carrying clipboards. Keanu sighed internally. It was too early for this. Janice stopped 3 feet from the stand, nose raised like she was smelling something unpleasant. "Well," she said sharply, "what is this supposed to be?" Keanu gave her a calm smile. "Breakfast for the kids. Just helping them start their day right." "That," she said, jabbing a finger toward the sign, "is not approved by the HOA." Several kids stepped back, their eyes wide. Liam hid behind Keanu's arm. Keanu's voice remained gentle. "It's just food. I'm not running a business. I'm just trying to help." Janice pulled out a stack of papers. "This constitutes an unapproved structure. Unauthorized distribution of goods. And," she added dramatically, "a violation of community cleanliness guidelines." Keanu blinked. "Cleanliness? I clean everything myself." "And gatherings," she snapped. "This creates a gathering. Gatherings require HOA clearance." The children looked confused. A few mothers standing nearby frowned, whispering angrily. Keanu lowered his voice. "Janice, these are just kids getting breakfast." "Not my problem," she said coldly. "The stand must be shut down immediately." A heartbreaking silence followed. Liam tugged Keanu's sleeve. "Mr. K, does that mean no more breakfast?" Keanu looked at the boy's sad face, then at the other children, hopeful, hungry, frightened of losing the one small kindness they had. He felt something tighten in his chest. Janice smirked. "Remove this stand by tomorrow morning, or the HOA will take action." She turned, heels clicking like a countdown to war. Keanu watched her leave, jaw clenched, but eyes soft as they fell on the kids. "Don't worry," he said quietly. "I'm not giving up on you." The revolt hadn't begun yet, but the spark had been lit. The next morning, the neighborhood felt different, quieter, heavier, like a storm was waiting behind the clouds. Keanu walked out carrying 2 containers of fresh pancake batter, expecting to see the usual row of sleepy-eyed kids waiting at the curb. Instead, he found nothing but an empty sidewalk and the faint sound of leaves rustling in the cold morning air. His heart sank for a moment until he turned the corner and saw them. 20 kids gathered behind his house, clustered around the back porch. Liam rushed forward first, clutching a backpack zipper as if it were a lifeline. "Mr. K, we didn't want the lady to get mad at you again," he said. "So we hid." The other kids nodded nervously, some clutching cups of water brought from home, some standing barefoot because they left in a hurry so their parents wouldn't wake up. The sight shook Keanu deeply. He knelt down, eye level with them, and said softly, "You never have to hide from kindness." His voice was calm, but his mind was burning. Something about the way the kids were scared of an adult helping them, made his chest tighten with anger he rarely allowed himself to feel. Minutes later, the parents started arriving. First one mother with tears in her eyes, then two fathers still in work uniforms, then a grandmother with trembling hands. They had all heard what happened. Some from their kids, others from neighbors, and a few from Janice's self-congratulating email that went out late last night, titled Community Structure Violation Corrected. By 7:30 a.m., more than a dozen adults stood in Keanu's backyard, forming a circle around him, not in confrontation, but in solidarity. A father named Mark stepped forward, face stern. "My son doesn't eat until noon at school," he admitted quietly. "What you started here, this helped more than you know." A single mother holding her toddler added, "We're not letting the HOA bully you. Or our kids." More parents nodded, some angry, some emotional, all visibly frustrated. Keanu felt the weight of their gratitude and fear, two powerful forces that no one should have to feel at the same time. But he also saw something else rising in the room. Resolve as they spoke, a group of HOA board members drove by slowly in a golf cart, pretending to inspect the neighborhood. But everyone knew they were watching. The parents went silent, their eyes sharp, their shoulders stiff. The board members didn't stop, they just stared in judgment, taking mental notes. One of them, the Vice President Harold, scribbled something on a clipboard, then pointed toward Keanu's backyard as if planning an attack route. When they finally rolled away, Mark muttered, "They think they own us." Another mother added bitterly, "Last week they fined me $50 because my welcome mat wasn't community approved." Meanwhile, they leave trash cans in the street for hours. The unfairness was boiling over, and Keanu could see it. But he also saw fear. No one wanted to risk more fines. No one wanted to be targeted. The HOA had power, and they abused it. Something had to change, but parents didn't know how to push back without making things worse. Keanu took a slow breath and stepped forward. "Listen," he said gently, "I never wanted conflict. This was never about challenging them. This is about making sure kids don't go to school hungry." His voice stayed calm, but people leaned in, hanging on to every word. "If the stand bothers them, then we'll move it. If they don't like the cart, we'll use a table. If gatherings are a problem, we'll set up a safe pickup system instead." Parents murmured in agreement, hopeful for a compromise. But then he added, with a quiet power that made everyone look up, "But I'm not stopping. Children shouldn't pay the price for someone else's rules." That line hit like a spark on dry grass. Parents exchanged glances. This wasn't just a neighbor helping anymore. This was someone willing to stand up when no one else dared to. Before the crowd dispersed, something unexpected happened. Liam's mother, exhausted from 2 night shifts in a row, stepped forward holding a small envelope. "Mr. Reeves," she whispered shakily, "this is from all of us." Inside was a small donation fund, $47 in total, crumpled bills, a few coins, a $5 gift card. Not much in money, but enormous in meaning. Keanu blinked hard, swallowing emotion. "No," he said softly, closing her hand around the envelope. "Keep it. Use it for your kids." The mother shook her head. "You already are." And just like that, the parents who once felt powerless looked at each other with certainty. If the HOA wanted a fight, they had just created an army. And the spark that was lit yesterday, today it caught flame. By the next morning, the mood in Silver Maple Estates had shifted from quiet frustration to a simmering hostility that crackled in the air like static before a lightning strike. Keanu stepped outside early, carrying boxes of yogurt cups and a fresh batch of homemade breakfast bars, expecting to continue his quiet, peaceful act of kindness. Instead, he found a bright orange sign staked directly into his front lawn. The words were printed in large, aggressive block letters: "Cease and desist. Unauthorized food distribution. Penalties will increase daily." A chill ran through him, not fear, but disbelief. He reached out and touched the sign gently, as if confirming it was real. That's when he noticed the second note, taped to his front door, a citation for $500, labeled as "repeated violation of community standards." He exhaled slowly. The HOA wasn't warning him anymore. They were declaring war. By 7 a.m., the kids had gathered again, this time even more than before. Word had spread fast. Some came from 2 streets over. Some came with their parents who parked a distance away just to avoid being noticed by HOA patrols. Liam spotted the sign first. His small face fell, and he ran toward Keanu, breathless. "Mr. K, are they making you stop?" He wasn't the only one asking. Dozens of eyes stared up at him, filled with worry and guilt they shouldn't have to carry. Keanu crouched down to their level, putting on the soft, reassuring smile he had mastered over the years. "No one is stopping us from caring for each other," he said. Breakfast is happening. Cheers erupted, small and hopeful and fragile. But before Keanu could set up an improvised serving table on his porch, 3 golf carts rolled up the street like a miniature convoy of self-importance. Janice stood in the front cart, arms crossed, sunglasses on even though the sun hadn't fully risen yet. Her expression said everything. She was here to make an example. Janice stepped out with exaggerated authority, clutching a binder thicker than an encyclopedia and just as outdated. "Mr. Reeves," she said in a tone that made his name sound like an insult, "you have ignored direct instructions from this association." She pointed at the children. "And you are encouraging minors to participate in unauthorized gatherings." Her voice was loud enough to ensure every neighbor could hear. Keanu stood still, steady, letting her finish her performance. "You are now in violation of 6 separate community regulations," she continued, flipping through her papers with theatrical precision. "Failure to comply will result in further fines and mandatory disciplinary hearings." A murmur spread through the parents. A few took protective steps closer to their kids. Someone whispered, "This is insane." Another muttered, "They're targeting him because he's famous." But Keanu simply looked at Janice calmly. "I'm feeding children," he said gently, "not running a carnival." That line sent a ripple of suppressed laughter through the crowd. Janice did not appreciate it. Her face stiffened. "Remove the food immediately," she demanded, "or the HOA will escalate this matter to legal enforcement." She turned toward the children and added sharply, "And you kids should go home. Now." The kids didn't move. Not one. Liam stepped forward instead, his voice trembling but brave. "We're hungry," he said. "We're just hungry." It was a sentence so simple and true that even a few board members seemed to shift uncomfortably. But not Janice. "Hunger," she snapped, "is not the HOA's responsibility." A gasp ran through the crowd. Parents exchanged outraged glances. One mother stepped forward angrily. "These are kids. You want them to go to school on empty stomachs." Janice rolled her eyes as if the question were an inconvenience. "If you have financial issues," she said coldly, "please consult county assistance. HOA policies are not designed for charity operations." That was it. The moment the crowd turned, the parents surged forward, not violently, but with a unified force Janice didn't expect. A father stepped between her and the kids. "You're not shutting down something that helps our children," he said firmly. A grandmother raised her voice. "If you fine him, you'll have to fine us too." More parents chimed in. "Fine me. And me." "Go ahead, Janice." One by one, they closed ranks around Keanu and the kids, forming a human shield of exhausted, fed-up, determined adults who'd had enough of petty rules ruling their lives. Janice blinked, stunned. This was not part of her plan. She looked around, searching for support from her board members, but they were slowly backing away, unwilling to stand against a crowd of furious parents. Keanu watched it all quietly, deeply moved. He hadn't asked for support, but he had earned it without trying. The love and desperation of this neighborhood, of these parents trying their best, had finally become louder than the HOA's rules. And for the first time in a long while, the HOA looked afraid. The confrontation on the sidewalk did not end with shouting or fists or chaos. Something far more powerful happened instead. Silence. A deep, charged silence that hovered between the HOA board members and the parents who refused to back down. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. And then, in a quiet, steady voice, Liam's mother stepped forward. "If you think you can bully us," she said, looking right at Janice, "you've chosen the wrong neighborhood." It was calm, not loud, but the firmness in her tone rippled through the crowd like a wave of awakening. Parents who had spent years swallowing unfair fines, warnings, and senseless HOA rules suddenly felt something shift inside them. A realization that the power the HOA waved around only existed because no one had ever challenged it. Until now. The board members glanced nervously at one another, unsure how to proceed without causing a full-scale revolt. Janice, however, wasn't ready to surrender. Her pride wouldn't let her. She opened her binder again, flipping pages aggressively as if she could find a rule sharp enough to stab the rebellion that had just formed. "This stand," she insisted, jabbing her finger at Keanu's porch, "violates Section 4B, unauthorized distribution." But before she could continue her lecture, a father cut in, raising his own folder, thicker than hers, held together with tape. "Actually," he said, voice steady, "Section 4B only applies to commercial distribution. Keanu's not selling a thing." Several parents nodded, some pulling out printed screenshots of HOA guidelines they had dug up overnight after the incident. One mother held up a highlighted sheet. "Also, Section 2A says temporary setups are allowed for community support." A wave of murmurs spread, agreement, confidence, challenge. The crowd wasn't just angry anymore, they were informed. For the first time, Janice's certainty flickered. Her eyes darted across the highlighted papers, the phones recording, the determined faces staring back at her. "This is not a debate," she said, her voice cracking slightly. But it didn't matter anymore. Her authority had already fractured. Keanu stepped forward then, not as a celebrity, not as someone looking to overshadow the parents, but as a quiet, grounding presence. "Janice," he said softly, "this stand doesn't break this community. It supports it." His tone wasn't confrontational, it was steady, compassionate, unshakable. If a rule exists that stops people from feeding children, then maybe the rule is the problem, not the people. The line hung in the air like a truth no one could unhear. Even the board members shifted uncomfortably. They had never been confronted with the ethical weight of their own decisions until now. Janice's face hardened. Pride was all she had left. "Rules exist for a reason," she snapped. "Without them, there is chaos." A mother stepped forward, her voice trembling with emotion. "My kid crying at school because his stomach hurts isn't chaos." Another parent added, "Kids going hungry is order to you." A chorus of frustrated voices rose, parents who rarely spoke up now letting years of quiet suffering pour out. They talked about unfair fines, ignored complaints, and policies that made their lives harder instead of better. And all of it connected back to one thing: the HOA never listened. Janice tried to talk over them, but her voice drowned under the sound of people reclaiming their right to be heard. For the first time in her long reign as HOA president, she was no longer in control. Realizing she was losing ground fast, Janice turned away, signaling the board members to follow. "This isn't over," she hissed. But the parents didn't flinch. They didn't shrink back. They stood taller, stronger, louder in their silence than any threat she could throw at them. As the HOA carts retreated down the street, one mother exhaled shakily and wiped tears from her face. Another hugged her child tightly. A father clapped Keanu on the shoulder. "Whatever happens next," he said, "we're with you." Keanu looked at all of them, the exhausted parents, the hopeful children, the neighbors who finally found their voice, and felt something swell inside him. Gratitude, responsibility, a fierce, quiet determination. The HOA had just walked away. But the war had only begun. The next morning, the neighborhood woke up with a tension that felt electric, sharp, expectant, like the neighborhood itself was holding its breath. Parents stood in their driveways longer than usual, watching the street. Kids peeked through curtains. Even the birds seemed quieter, as if waiting to see what would unfold. Keanu stepped out of his home at dawn, carrying a single large cooler filled with fruit, granola, muffins, and juice boxes. Nothing fancy, Nothing that could be twisted into a violation of any rule. He placed it gently at the edge of his driveway, not the sidewalk, not the street, just his own property. A simple handwritten sign sat on top, "Take what you need." K. No gathering, no stand, no serving, just kindness, unregulated and unstoppable. It was technically within every HOA rule, but it was also a statement. Within minutes, kids began appearing one by one. But this time, they didn't come quietly or timidly. They came proudly, walking with their parents, who stood beside them instead of hiding in cars or shadows. Liam walked up first, eyes bright. "Is it okay?" he whispered. Keanu nodded. "It's always okay to take care of yourself." The boy lifted a juice box and a muffin, then smiled, a real smile, the kind he hadn't shown since the first day of the breakfast stand. But before more kids could reach the cooler, 3 golf carts turned onto the street, Janice and the HOA board rolling in like storm clouds ready to unload. This time, though, something was different. The parents didn't step back. They didn't scatter. They formed a semicircle in front of the driveway, not aggressive, just firm, present, united. Janice stopped her cart and climbed out slowly, as if expecting a riot that wasn't there. She looked at the cooler, then at Keanu, then at the parents blocking her path. "Mr. Reeves," she said, voice tight, "this is a continuation of your unauthorized stand." But her certainty sounded thinner than before, more brittle than commanding. Keanu didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He simply said, "This is food placed on my property. No stand, no structure, no distribution. Just a cooler." One father chimed in, holding up printed HOA rules. "There's no violation here," a mother added, "and even if there was, you'd be fining all of us, not just him." The line hit with force. Dozens of parents stood there, ready to take the fine together, willing to face consequences as a unified front. It wasn't rebellion, it was community. The very thing the HOA claimed to protect. For a long moment, Janice stood frozen, caught between rules that made no moral sense and a neighborhood that had awakened to its own power. She scanned their faces, the mothers holding toddlers, the fathers in work boots, the kids quietly eating breakfast. And maybe, for a brief second, something human flickered in her eyes. Or maybe it was fear, because she finally realized that this wasn't about a stand or a cooler or a rule. This was about people who were done being controlled by policies that forgot compassion. "The board will be reviewing this," she said weakly. But no one reacted. No one flinched. She wasn't a threat anymore. Just a person with a clipboard and a title that no longer inspired obedience. Slowly, she stepped back into her cart, turned around, and rode away without another word. And the board members followed silently, eyes down, defeated. When they disappeared around the corner, something extraordinary happened. Parents began clapping, soft at first, then louder, growing with relief and joy. Kids cheered, raising their juice boxes like tiny trophies. A grandmother wiped tears from her face. And Keanu. He just stood there, humbled, overwhelmed, watching happiness return to the faces of people who had been living under fear for far too long. Liam ran up and hugged him without warning, small arms wrapping around his waist. "Thank you," he whispered. Other kids joined, and soon Keanu found himself surrounded by a circle of little arms and big hearts. He, kneeling down, voice trembling, said, "You don't have to thank me. This is your neighborhood, your community. You made this happen." And in that moment, he knew it was true. As the sun rose higher, casting warm gold over Silver Maple Estates, neighbors stayed, talked, laughed, shared stories, shared food, shared hope. Something had changed, not just in the fight against the HOA, but in the spirit of the community itself. People who used to walk with their heads down were now looking each other in the eye. Parents who once felt alone were now standing in solidarity. Kids who used to go hungry were now eating freely and without shame. And Keanu Reeves, the quiet neighbor who just wanted to help, had become the spark that lit a revolution of kindness. The HOA had tried to stop a breakfast. Instead, they awakened a community.